Hey everybody, I'm doing a different kind of post today. I will do a little quick thing, I think, about the game later for the Eagles, but I wanted to get to this real quick. So I put up a post on Facebook about Colin Cowherd mentioning that he thinks that John Harbaugh is in trouble with his future with the Baltimore Ravens. And I've been saying this now for at least this season or the last couple of years that I think the Ravens it's time for the Ravens to make a coaching change. Now, there are some people saying that that he needs to stay, he's a good coach, why we let him go? And then there are other people saying that he needs to go. And I think it's about 50-50. But I want to show you from the data I've researched and things that I put together, what I feel, the way I feel about John Harbaugh and his era during the Baltimore Ravens. So we're going to get right to it. And we're going to look at 2008 was the end of an era with Brian Billick and the start of a new one with John Harbaugh. Brian Billick has now been fired after being the most successful coach for the Baltimore Ravens. He did have guys like Rex Ryan. He had guys Marvin Lewis, Jack Del Rio, Mike Nolan, who all got coaching jobs, head coaching jobs. Not really any of them been successful, but when they were a group together as a unit, they probably put together one of the best defenses the NFL has seen probably since the Bears in the 80s and the Steelers in the 60s and 70s. John Harbaugh was introduced as a new head coach, and in that draft, the Ravens draft Joe Flacco and Ray Rice. Now, as we all know, when new head coaches are brought in, they usually draft a new or try to sign as a free agent a new quarterback. They want their guy, so to speak. They live and die with that guy, as we saw with Brian Billick and Kyle Bowler, which ended his tenure as head coach for the Baltimore Ravens. Now, going into that season, Harbaugh does inherit a top 5 Ravens defense. The notable players carried over from that are Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, Todd Heap, Ben Grubbs, Bart Scott, Terrell Suggs, Marshall Yanda, and Haloti Ngata. During that season, especially when you're bringing in a rookie quarterback, and I know for all people who know the story about Joe Flacco is that he was a third-string quarterback on the roster, but then Troy Smith got like a stomach virus in something, and then Kyle Bowler had a season-ending injury, which then thrusted Joe Flacco into the starting quarterback position. They did go all the way to the AFC Championship game that season, which they ended up losing to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I think did end up winning the Super Bowl that year. So it was unprecedented, definitely, for a new head coach and new quarterback to go into that season and possibly get to their first Super Bowl together in the first year. So right there, it looked like things were starting in the right path. Now we're going to look here at the Harbaugh coaching tree. I wanted to make note of this only because I think it's very important. If we look at the running backs coach, we have Wilbert Montgomery, and then we have quarterbacks coach Hugh Jackson. Sorry about that. I had to get some stuff together for the presentation. But anyway, we have running backs coach Wilbert Montgomery. While he was here for the Baltimore Ravens, we had Ray Rice, he had Willis McGahee, and LaRon McClain, and Vontae Leach, and those guys. They had one of the more dominant running attacks under his tutelage as running back coach. But he did decide to leave at the end of 2012. I believe he was not given an extension after the Super Bowl win and went on to coach the Cleveland Browns, I think, for a couple seasons, and then I think he's retired as of right now. Quarterback coach was brought in with him, Hugh Jackson, in 2008. He stayed until 2009. Was Joe Flacco's first quarterbacks coach. Now we've seen what he has done in what he did in Cincinnati with Andy Dalton. He developed a very high-powered offense as offensive coordinator there. They had A.J. Green and Giovanni Bernard and Jeremy Hill and Marvin Jones and Tyler Eifert. They had a lot of good weapons on offense, and they put one of the better offensive projects or programs or whatever in the NFL, and added another threat to the AFC North. Usually the AFC North is traditionally just the Steelers and the Ravens, and the Bengals are kind of hanging around, usually tough team, but not a team that makes the playoffs. This is a team that now was making the playoffs. Then we get to, as I highlighted in bold here, we have Cam Cameron as offensive coordinator in 2008-2012. We all know what happened to Cam Cameron. When he was brought in 2008, he was definitely well respected from what he did in San Diego with Phillip Rivers, being a West Coast type of quarterback. He brought the same system to Baltimore. It did not work out. They had one of some of that during that stretch most anemic offenses under him. They didn't really have any wide receivers. They couldn't draft anybody. They had Derek Mason, who was like 34, 35, kind of like they do now with Steve Smith being 36, 37 years old. They didn't have any guys that could get downfield. Nobody stretched the field. You had Todd Heap, but he was starting to get hurt. He was getting older. All they really had was the running game, and then you still had a quarterback who was still trying to find his legs in the NFL. Mark Trestman, we already know what happened recently with him. That was just a failed system. It didn't work out with the Ravens. Like I said, he felt it had the same fate as Cam Cameron. Obviously, he did not last as long because the Ravens organization has seen this story before. Now, the guy that replaced Cam Cameron, quarterback coach, who was at the time in 2012, was Jim Caldwell. He took over for Cam Cameron and did end up shaking the team up enough where the offense was good enough to get into the playoffs. Now, mind you, the defense was only ranked, I think, 12th or 13th, but they were good defensively enough, a bend-don't-break type of defense to hold on and go to win a Super Bowl. Now, what I have bold in yellow here is Jerry Rosburg, who is still the only guy left from 2008 that came in with John Harbaugh that's still there as a major coordinator is Jerry Rosburg. Now, what we've seen from him the last couple seasons, we've seen what the punt return team has done. Punt teams, kickoff teams, and kick return teams, field goal teams, what they've been able to do. They have been phenomenal. They got Justin Tucker, Morgan Cox, and Sam Cook have been able. Sam Cook has been one of the most accurate punters in the NFL since he's been with the Ravens. Justin Tucker is becoming now the best kicker in the NFL. They've been able to block field goals, return those things for touchdowns. When Jacoby Jones was there, when they had an explosive guy who could return punts, that was definitely a spark plug. Having that kind of weapon on special teams to be able to return it to the house for 6 points made Jerry Rosburg, in my opinion, the most consistent coach the Ravens have had since during Harbaugh's tenure. The most successful coach. He was then Chuck Pagano came with him as secondary coach, and then ended up getting the defensive coordinator job when Rex Ryan left, and still kept was very good, likable guy. Players loved him on defense. Ray Lewis liked him. Kind of let the players still run the defense with Ed Reed and Suggs and those guys and Nada, and they kept safe face and things like that. Then after that happened, we have Greg Madison come in, and Greg Madison, took over. He was a terrible defensive coordinator. They were quite awful during those years. And he did not last long. He lasted about 3 seasons, which is 3 seasons longer than he should have. Now, the other guy I want to mention is offensive line coach Juan Castillo. Juan Castillo was brought in during 2012, the Super Bowl run, as the run game coordinator. He didn't really have a role in kind of what the offensive game had done. They had kind of set that up with Jim Caldwell and didn't really want to add any new pieces to what was going on as they were going into the playoffs. Juan Castillo now is the offensive line coach and has been since 2013. The one thing that we have noticed since 2013 up to this point is that the offensive line play for the Baltimore Ravens has been atrocious. They've gotten Flacco injured. The run game has been anemic since then. They have not been able to figure out, I'll have to say John Harbaugh has not been able to figure out what to do with guys on offense and how to develop an offensive group of coordinators to do well and getting this team together. Defensive coordinator, he also brought in Dean Pease. I believe Dean Pease coached with his dad. I think it was John Harbaugh's dad he coached with, I think he was under Harbaugh. He had some connection to the Harbaugh family. And while Dean Pease is not the greatest defensive coordinator, he has done well with what he has right now. With the lack of depth in the cornerback position, I think in the secondary definitely for the Baltimore Ravens, he has done an exceptional job. And I think if he gets more talent to work with, he could do a better job. Now, I don't like his style for the playing off the guys, letting the receivers kind of run these short routes and kill them all day with that, but at the end of the day, he's not the worst guy in the world, so I have to kind of give him a pass on that. But when I notice this coaching tree, a lot of these guys ended up either leaving to go become head coaches in other teams or just decided to go and become coordinators elsewhere. The problem is that when these guys were brought in 2008, 2009, they were not replaced very well. So I'm going to go here to Harbaugh's record. Now, I think this is very important, most definitely. In 2008, I said they went 11-5, eliminated by the playoffs, from the playoffs by the Steelers. 2009, they were 9-7, missed the play. They were in the playoffs. 2010, 12-4, made the playoffs but eliminated by the Steelers. 2011, made the playoffs, eliminated by the Patriots, and then finally in 2012, they go 10-6 and win the Super Bowl. Since that point, since 2012, and a lot of these guys and coaches and coordinators have moved on to other teams. 2013, 8-8, Ravens missed the playoffs. 2014, when the Gary Kubiak years, when he was offensive coordinator, the Ravens get to the divisional round of the playoffs. Flacco, in that game throws 4 touchdowns, phenomenal, and they get eliminated by the Patriots. The Patriots end up winning, going on to win the Super Bowl. 5-11 last year, missed the playoffs. A lot of injuries, bad football play all around. Missed the playoffs. Now, here we are in 2016. They're 7-6 in the playoff hunt. But what we have seen so far under the Harbaugh era in the last few years, the Ravens are not capable of beating elite teams when they need to. We saw what happened with the Dallas Cowboys. We saw what happened this past Monday with the New England Patriots. If it wasn't for those special teams plays, that game is over at halftime. The Patriots are probably up by 30 at that point. If Eric Wells doesn't get that interception, the Patriots are up by 30. There's no way the Ravens come back, and they just look so anemic since then. And it's really hard to go ahead and say, look, based on the decisions that this guy has made as head coach, you're in charge of hiring the coaches that are supposed to be able to get the best out of the players that you have. I know a lot of people have been calling for Ozzie Newsome's head, and a lot of people say we've missed on drafts and things like that. And granted, that's true, but if you look at every other team, most of them, you maybe get 1 or 2, 3 players in those drafts that end up becoming, decent or good players on your squad. A lot of those guys don't end up making it in the NFL. You're lucky if you get 2 or 3 guys in your drafts that end up becoming staples on your team. And to get rid of Ozzie Newsome, especially when you look at what he did this year, who did he get us? He got us Tavon Young, who is probably going to become the number 2 cornerback, definitely next season. I think he's earned that. He ended up getting Eric Weddle, who has definitely helped the secondary out as far as providing a leader back there. It's free agency. They did end up drafting. You got Brandon Williams. You got Timmy Jernigan playing well. You got Kenneth Dixon playing well right now. Kyle Juszczyk has been really good. They did draft, Dennis Pitta, those guys. So Marshall Yanda, Ronnie Stanley. So they have put enough pieces together on the field that you would think this team would be capable of not struggling so much against tougher teams. But I think it comes down to an attitude thing. And I'm going to look now at Harbaugh's record as I continue this thing. His total win-loss record as of right now is 84-57. Now, that's a great winning record. I think Billick ended up finishing close to 500 with his. So, all things considered, that's a great resume for a head coach. A great winning resume. His win record from 2008 to 2012 up to the Super Bowl was 54-26. He had one of the greatest win percentages of most coaches. Now, from win-loss records from 2013 to present, right now, he is 30-31, and that's what's concerning me. What's concerning me now is at this point, he started off strong. Maybe at some point you start to level off a bit, but not to the point where you're starting to lose more games than you're winning. And it's getting to a point now for the Ravens where they were winning a lot of games under Harbaugh and getting to the playoffs and having opportunities to win championships. And now they're starting to get to a point where now we're like, maybe we make the playoffs again for the third time in 4 years. And where Steve Bisciotti has been talking about is that he's tired of this team struggling to make the playoffs each season. He wants this team to be like the Patriots and be like the Steelers, be like the Green Bay Packers, and be like the Seattle Seahawks, where they're always talked about being in the discussion for playoff contender or Super Bowl contending teams. And Steve Bisciotti, I don't think is going to hold out too long and let this kind of talent go to waste. Now, I'm going to get to, I think, some important stats that I think are concerning to this team. The running game ranking, I think, has been very important for the Ravens because we have all known from its inception the Ravens have been a running football team. That's how they win, especially in December and January. They run the ball. It's cold. You just line against line, running backs running up the middle, you're running the clock out, things like that, letting the defense win the football game, control the game. The rushing game ranking from 2008 to 2012 is averaged around being the ninth best in the league during those years. They were definitely top 10. They kept them a lot of football games. Ray Rice definitely helped out with that, especially for those years. Willis McGahee being there, LaRon McClain. They did play very well. Vontae Leach as well. They blocked well. They controlled the games. They let the defense dictate what all their offense was going to do, keeping the other offense off the field. Now, the running game from 2013 after the Super Bowl up to right now has averaged 23rd in the league. They are now on the bottom half of the rankings in the NFL, which is a huge decrease from being top 10 run game in 2012 for the last 4 years, now being average 23rd. That's not going to cut it. Now, the only way that would make sense is if the other side, especially your passing, then starts to, increase as well. Like we see now with the Steelers, you're starting to see the Steelers pass the ball more and not run the ball a lot, but they're a top 10 offense when they're passing. That did not happen for the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens passing ranking from 2008 to 2016 as a whole have averaged 22nd in the league. Their best passing year was in 2014 under Gary Kubiak, and they were 13th. Okay? 13th. The Ravens offense has only cracked the top 10 once in all of its 20 plus years that's been in the league. 2014, when the total offense, to put the numbers together, total offense has only cracked the top 10 once in 20 years. Okay, in 2014. Like I said, the only way you can get away with the run game dropping from 9th from those years to 23rd up to now, this point would be if the offense went from average of bottom 20s to top 10. That's the only way you can make an excuse for not running the football as much. But now that you're averaging you're 22nd in passing and 23rd in running, you're not going to win and score a lot of points in football games, especially in a pass-driven league. There's no way you're going to keep up, as I listed here, the rival Steelers in total offense in chronological order. So this is I did this from 2008 up to 2016, up to right now. They went from 22nd to 7th to 14th, 12th, 21st, 20th. Now, I wanted to list these last 3 years. During these last 3 years is when they brought in a new offensive coordinator after Bruce Arians goes ahead and takes the job in Arizona. They have ranked 2nd, 3rd, and 7th. Okay, and 7th is still being debated because they still have 2 more games left to go. So they still could possibly still move up there and maybe finish 5th. The Steelers' offense has become a top 5 the top 5 team, a top 5 offense in the last 3 years. And this is total offense. Okay? They have become a top 5 offense. And this is an offense that has been relatively stagnant, like the Ravens. If you look at a lot of the chronological order, the 22nd, 7th, 14th, 12th, was around the same area the Ravens were in. There was a run-dominated offenses. Okay, you run-dominated offenses, and the defense controlled the games. The Ravens and Steelers were mirror images of each other. But the Steelers jumped on the bandwagon early and realized with the change in the rules and things like that this was becoming a pass-heavy league. With the rules against the cornerbacks, and you can't touch the quarterback anymore, and penalties on defensive receivers, and the holding penalties, and legal contact and pass interference calls being called a lot more. The Steelers jumped on it and got a coordinator, Chuck Haley, I think Haley is his name, who came from Kansas City, has created a top 5 offense, and now they're starting to surge again at the end of the season in the Steelers. They were 2nd, 3rd, and 7th as of right now in the last 3 seasons. They have jumped on the ball. You can see it right now. They got guys Antonio Brown. even with guys losing guys like Martavius Bryant, and they're still finding ways for their offense to be explosive. Now, I think when I list all of that and I tell you what has happened with this Ravens team, especially on the offense, the defense has gotten back together. Dean Pease, like I said, has done a great job. I think they do well. The defense has done well with beating teams that are beatable. But when it comes to the elite guys, you got to be able to put an offense that can go point for point with them. This defense and the way the rules are called these days, this Ravens defense is going to shut out guys that they used to. They're not going to do that. It's still that bend but don't break defense, and you're going to get some turnovers. But as we've seen now for the last few seasons, the Ravens defense is on the field way too much. They get tired during the end of the game, and usually if another team is already still hanging around, what happens at the end of the game, what we saw in 2015, what we were seeing now, Ravens losing these close games at the end of the game because the defense is just too tired. They're beat. They can't hold on. And other teams know that. They're going the sugar huddle, no huddle down the field, and they usually kick the game-winning field goal or score the game-winning touchdown. And the Ravens just don't have enough in the tank on defense to keep those guys out of the end zone. They just don't. Now I'm going to go to Harbaugh's responsibility. I think that he has to take responsibility for not hiring coaches that can develop players. Since 2008, when those guys came in, like I said, Hugh Jackson and Willard Montgomery and those guys who helped develop those players, you still have Rex Ryan there and Chuck Pagano. You're starting to see now a lot of these offensive guys are not developing. These receivers aren't getting any better. Bashard Perriman is still missing passes, and Kamar Aiken's gone non-existent now. You're bringing guys like Chris Moore. You've seen him a couple times during games, and you got some guys where you look at could have some talent, but you don't know. You don't know what you have right now because it just seems to me that the guys that Harbaugh is hiring don't really understand how to play football in the league today. If this was 20 years ago, they probably do very well with a run type, run dominated league and run and defense dominated league. This is all about offense now, and I don't think he has the guys who are capable of putting that kind of offensive production together. He also says he has a say on type of players he wants in his team. Ever since the Ray Rice incident, the Ravens have now started to stay away from guys who are at-risk players. Anybody that has any kind of off-the-field issue, the Ravens, because of that fiasco that happened with Ray Rice, want to stay away from it. And I think they've lost out on some quality players. They lost out on guys like Vontaze Burfict. While Vontaze Burfict has a mean streak and he's been known to be a dirty player or whatever, so has James Harrison, known as a dirty player. But Vontaze Burfict is one of the better linebackers in the league. They did, I think, luck up with C.J. Mosley, but C.J. to me doesn't have that attitude that you would think they're on this Ravens team that should have. And I think that, they say he's going to stay closer to good character guys and smart guys. And while that's great, while it may work on somebody else's team, usually a team is supposed to embody the city that it operates in. Baltimore is a gritty type city with a lot of attitude. We're very passionate about our sports. We don't let anybody talk bad about our city. We can talk bad about our city all we want. But if you come from the outside, you better not say anything bad about Baltimore. And I think that's the thing that we're missing from this team all around is that you can bring in guys like Steve Smith and, the tough guys or whatever like that, but you need some homegrown guys you draft in that have some attitude on this team. Now, I want to segue that into what happened in 2012. During the end of that season, the Ravens got to a point where they were losing. They've lost the last 3 games. And Anquan Bolden, Ed Reed, Bernard Powell, and I think a few other players saw Harbaugh, went to go see him, and basically had a talking to him. Like, look, man, we don't like the way this is going. We're trying to head into the playoffs here, heading strong, and we're floundering right now. What's going on? This got Cam Cameron fired, but then it also boosted the team up because the players were taking control of the team, and they wanted to win the football games. After the Super Bowl is over, Anquan gets traded, Bernard Powell is released, and so is Ed Reed. Ed Reed's allowed to walk. He doesn't sign this. They don't give him a new contract to sign with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, granted, Ed Reed was beyond his prime. A lot of people were upset with the Anquan Bolden move. I actually supported it at the time. The problem is, though, is that since that happened, the Ravens have avoided these alpha male type guys. He's staying away from players that are alpha male type guys. Guys that usually control a locker room. When they're down at halftime or whatever like that, they get into modes where they're the ones yelling at their teammates and the coach is not saying anything at halftime, but the player, that guy is, or those players are. Ray Lewis and Ed Reed were those type of guys. Lodonato was those type of guys where they were yelling at each other for, you need to produce out here. No one, if you really look at Ray Lewis's stuff on YouTube or the stuff they did a story about him on Info Network, it was quite known that Ray Lewis not only controlled that defense, but controlled the entire team as a whole. They listened when Ray was talking. They listened to that man. Since Ray and Ed have gone, you have Terrell Suggs left. He's not that rah-rah type guy. He's a good player, get me wrong. He'll probably be a Hall of Famer. But he's not that rah-rah type guy. Neither is Joe Flacco. Neither is anybody on that defense that are going to be like those guys. You don't see that attitude. And I think, like I said, I've said it plenty of times with John Harbaugh, is the type of head coach where he doesn't like anybody to challenge him. He wants to have the final say. He wants everybody to kind of like him. I feel like he's like the stepdad, just trying to act cool so that everybody else likes him. No, he doesn't do too much. He tries to overdo things and do two things like he shouldn't be doing just so they can like him. And I think that's what's the embodiment of this team is that he's just not what we've seen playing games with the challenges, the lack of clock management. You're just shaking your head as a Ravens fan like, why is it now, with Flacco being 8 years in, Harbaugh, same amount of time, and you guys are still making these same mistakes? You should have figured this out by now. Why are you guys working on practice? And, why is there a need to have these kind of meetings where guys need to tell the coaches? Why is there an open dialogue now between the coaches and staff and the players saying, hey, what should we do here? What do you think, guys, is comfortable for you to do? What do you think we should, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of continuity with this team, player-wise and coach-wise, that they feel free to talk amongst each other and criticize each other when things are going wrong and figure out what things they can do that go right. And I think that's the issue with this team right now. I think that Harbaugh has created an environment with this team where there are not a lot of guys willing to say anything. Harbaugh did step up to call out Marty Morningwicks, and he was too conservative. But then we come out and saw that Patriots game and say, like, you can say what you want, Joe Flacco, but, that last drive of the game probably lost us the football game. And I think the situation is for the Ravens is that, with John Harbaugh getting Joe Flacco and sticking by him, usually you live and die as a head coach by your quarterback. And if the Ravens don't make the playoffs this year, I have to believe that John Harbaugh is gone. A lot of people don't think he's gone. A lot of people think he's going to stay. A lot of people, especially on 105.7 The Fan, want to say he's a great head coach and all that stuff. And I think he's a good head coach. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a good head coach for a team that already has stuff in place. For a team that already has, like, if he went to go coach the Seattle Seahawks, I think he'd do great there. You already got Richard Sherman. You got Cam Chancellor. You got Russell Wilson. You got Earl Thomas. I mean, you got a lot of guys already there. Bobby Wagner. You got a lot of veteran guys on that team that lead that football team. This Ravens team, on the other hand, is very young. You got Terrell Suggs and Steve Smith on their way out. Elvis Dumerville's on his way out. So you're going to be left with a lot of young guys, and your quarterback isn't a rah-rah, workout with wide receivers in the off-season type guy. He's a 9-to-5 guy, doesn't look at film, doesn't study defense, he doesn't read defenses. He just kind of tell me what to do, and I'll get the ball there. That's why you saw when he was under Gary Kubiak, he had his best years because he was a quarterback's he was a quarterback under John Elway. He knows how quarterback's supposed to operate, so he was telling him what he needed to do to become a successful quarterback. Problem is that that Joe Flacco doesn't retain any of that information. He needs that coordinator or that quarterback coach there to guide him every step of the way while he's playing that season. And we've seen that. He's not a kind of quarterback that can run an offense. He needs a coordinator or a coach behind him to help him run said offense. And I think that's the problem with John Harbaugh. He has not been successful. That if you're going to keep Joe Flacco, I think that's what the Ravens need to decide now. If you're going to keep Flacco, something's got to happen. The Harbaugh experience, I think, is that is over. I think at this point, they need to find a more dynamic type of coordinator. I think Josh McDaniels from the New England Patriots would be great for that position, maybe as head coach. He had a shot in Denver and messed that up, but You saw how well that offense runs under Josh McDaniels with the lack of talent that they have. Can you imagine how well that Ravens offense would look? He's got two great running backs. Okay, you still got Buck Allen back there. You got Mike Wallace. You got Bashard Perryman. You got Kyle Juszczyk that you can use. You got Michael Campanera when he's healthy. You still got Dennis Pitta. You got Crockett Gilmore. You have a lot to work with on the Ravens that the Patriots on offense don't really have, but they are top 10 offense under Josh McDaniels. And I think that's where the Ravens need to go, is that the special team stuff, Jerry Rosburg's got that. But you need a coach that when something's going on offense or whatever like that, he's able to correct it and not sit there like at the end of each game, we need to run the ball more or we need to do this better. Every game is the same excuses each game. We're like, well, why don't you fix it? Because he doesn't know what he's doing. That's the whole point. Harbaugh does not know what he's doing when it comes to offensive and defensive schemes because he doesn't know any schemes. He's just sitting out there looking like, I can't tell Marty Mornhinweg this is wrong because I just don't know. I don't know what to tell him, what scheme to run or anything. He's not telling his coordinator to, hey, run the football more or, hey, stop telling Joe to do these check down passes and things like that. But like I said, at the end of the day, the head coach is tied to the quarterback. That's why I would not be surprised at the end of the season that you see Joe Flacco and Harbaugh probably are gone at the end of the season, especially if the Ravens don't make the playoffs. I think the Ravens have to make a decision here. And I think the decision is that you move on from Joe Flacco and John Harbaugh. And a lot of people say, well, who do you get to place Joe Flacco? I'm like, you got to start over at this point. You got a good young squad, I think. And you're at a point now where you don't want to take a step back because you know the Bengals will be back next season. They're too good for that. You know they're going to be back next season. Okay? And when you already have dealing with the Steelers now, they're not going to get any worse. They're going to keep getting better. You got to be able to keep pace in your division. You don't play in the AFC East. You got to keep pace. And I think the Ravens need to make a drastic move here to try to get a top 10 offense. If that means sacrificing some on defense, then so be it. But that's the way the league operates. You get to the playoffs with your offense, and if you have a solid enough defense, we can have around 15, ranked around 15, like the Ravens were. They were 12th or 13th in the league at the time, but they won a Super Bowl. And the offense was ranked 13th, but it was enough to get them to the Super Bowl and win and become Super Bowl champions. So I think the Harbaugh era, while at the beginning was definitely fruitful and great for the Baltimore Ravens, is not being so much. As we've all seen, a lot of people want to give him credit for 2012 Super Bowl. I give all that credit to Ray Lewis and Ed Reed for keeping that team together. I think the Ray Lewis retirement thing definitely had an effect on those guys, saying we want to win one for Ray. You saw that with the Pittsburgh Steelers when Jerome Bettis retired when they played in Detroit. So I think that definitely had an impact. But I think now that Harbaugh actually has to coach and actually has to find guys who can coach and get the best out of these players, it's not working. It's not working. It hasn't for the last 2 years. We gave him a mulligan for last season because of all the injuries, but now guys are getting healthy at the right time, and this offense is still sputtering along. And if they go, especially on Christmas Day, I think that's going to be the game right there. If they go into Christmas Day against a Steelers defense that's not great, but they go into that game and they lose that game, especially if the Steelers blow them out. If the Steelers go into that game, that Christmas Day game, and blow them out, that's the end of Harbaugh and Joe Flacco. That's the end. Because at that point, you have now taken a step back. Before you were even with the Steelers. The Steelers kind of teetered a bit up here, then we came right up here, but we always stayed neck and neck with each other. The Steelers go in Christmas Day game and they blow out the Ravens. And the Ravens do that same check down stuff and don't seem to get an offense together. I think it's all they're gonna have to blow it up. They're gonna have to. They're gonna have to start a full fresh rebuild at that point. And just start over. But that's my little video, my little presentation. Hope you guys liked it. I just wanted to give my little spiel on Harbaugh and what I thought about him and things like that. And just let me know what you guys think. Leave the comments below on Facebook or on YouTube or whatever. And I'll do a little Ravens video. I'll probably do that tomorrow because of the weather and stuff. I'll probably be inside. So I will see you guys. I said I'll do my thing tomorrow, Saturday, and like I said, just any comments or anything you want to talk about if you want me to comment on. All right, peace.